Yo, what it is? What's up, people? Today, we're gonna be talking about how much it cost me to K-swap my Honda Prelude. It's been 2 months since I've successfully K-swapped my Prelude, and I think I am 100% qualified to share this knowledge with you all. I've been getting like a million people asking me these questions. What motor mounts do you use? What axles? What ECU? How do you do the wiring? Yada, yada, yada. And ultimately, how much does it cost? To be honest, I don't even know. I've been too scared to look at how much I spent on the swap. And we're gonna take a guess. I'm gonna say I spent, I don't know, man. There's too many things to consider. I'm gonna say at least 10K. But that's because there's a lot of things I bought, a lot of miscellaneous things. But anyways, every part and whatever I go through, I'm gonna categorize it, okay? I'm gonna go over the must-haves, you know, like the engine, transmission, yada, yada, yada. Optional upgrades, and then tools, all right? So 3 categories: must-have, optional, tools. Let's do this thing. All right, so let's start off with the most basic thing. You want to K-swap your car, right? What motor do you go with? There's so many variations. There's so many K-series motors. To keep it simple, there's pretty much the K20 and the K24. The K20 Type R motor is supposed to be the better option. It's just more expensive. On the other hand, there's the K24, which is more torquey, it's more abundant, and since it's more abundant, the prices are a lot cheaper. And you can find them in America, like almost at any junkyard. So anyways, I got the K24A2 motor from a friend of a friend for $600. So that's a great price, right? Versus a Type R motor for almost 3K. Another thing I want to note is I have an 8th gen Honda Civic Si, which comes with the K20 motor, right? But in the Civic community, it's very common for people to K24 swap their Civic. So it kind of makes sense to go with the K24. It's abundant, it's cheaper, and more torqueier. Transmission, you can pretty much get any transmission you want that comes paired with the K series. I'm honestly not very knowledgeable in this area. I went with the transmission from a Honda Civic Si because I already have a Honda Civic Si. And what's good about this transmission is it's 6-speed LSD, and I think that's about it. The engine code is K20Z3, and I paid $1,000 for this. The typical price is probably about $1,200. Shifter and cables, I heard that you could probably use different shifters and cables with different transmissions, but I wanted to stick with what came with my transmission. So I got the K20Z3 transmission, K20Z3 shifter, and K20Z3 shifter cables. Both of the shifter and cables are from Hybrid Racing, and they cost a pretty penny, man. I got the shifter and cables on a Black Friday deal, so I saved a little bit of money. It still came out to be $692.19. Now, if you wanted to save money, you could just get the shifter and shifter cables from an 8th gen Civic Si, from a junkyard, or from a part out. The only tricky thing is getting the shifter installed. I went with the Hybrid Racing shifter because it's like a no-cut shifter, and it's meant to just bolt into your car if you have like an old school Civic or Integra. But on the Prelude, I couldn't just bolt it in. So I still had to do some modification myself, but it was much easier to install versus installing the actual 8th gen Civic shifter. ECU, all right. So to make everything very easy to understand, just in case this is your first K-swap or you're thinking about attempting one, all K-swaps are based on the 2002 to 2004 Acura RSX, okay? So if you can imagine a 02, 04 RSX, all we're doing is taking the engine harness, and ECU from the RSX and just putting it in another chassis, okay? And then you just figure out the small details on how to get it hooked up to your chassis, right? All right, well anyways, so ECU, you pretty much want the 02 to 04 RSX ECU and engine harness. I went with Honda K Pro, which is pretty much a tuning software. What they do is they take the RSX ECU, put in their little chip or board, they send it back to you, and you're able to pretty much tune it yourself. So this is one area where I wasted money. So I just ordered it from Hybrid Racing. I had them source me an ECU. I have Honda installed on it. So I spent a total of $1,192.53 on Honda K Pro. Typically, Honda itself is probably like 700 bucks. And I believe Hybrid Racing charged me about 400 for the ECU. You could go to Junkyard and get one yourself. You could get the RSX ECU for maybe $100, maybe a little bit more, or locally from somebody, probably for like $200. So if you're trying to save money on this swap, I recommend trying to source the RSX ECU yourself. And you don't even have to get K Pro. You could just use the RSX ECU. You would just have to find a way to bypass the immobilizer. Or you could go full standalone ECU, which isn't much more than what I paid. If I were to redo this swap, I would go with the Haltech Elite something. I don't know the specific models. But the standalone ECUs are pretty much newer technology and just a lot more options. I would just want newer stuff. Engine harness. Remember, we're focusing on an 02, 04 RSX. If you can find it in the junkyard, you'll save a lot of money. I went with Jack Spania K20 tuck harness. The engine harness cost me $294.03. Whew. And I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with their engine harness. A lot of people have mixed reviews about their engine harness. It's much better than paying a premium price. Originally, I wanted to get the Rywire engine harness. It was like 800 bucks. And I was like, man, I'm kind of in too deep with this swap. So I just want to save a little bit. And that's why I got the Jack Spania one. Now, besides the engine harness, there's two other harnesses that you need for this swap, okay? You need a conversion harness and a charge harness. The charge harness, you can make yourself. It's inexpensive and there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube on how to make it. But the conversion harness, this was the weirdest thing to wrap my head around, like to understand the concept. So let's say this is the ECU, right? You got an engine harness that communicates with the engine, and then you need a second harness which communicates with the chassis. Pretty much it needs to connect to your starter motor, your ignition switch, fuel pump, main relay, and O2 sensor. Now this was a part that was pretty tricky because, you know, electrical stuff is pretty intimidating if you're not into electrical wiring. And since K-swaps aren't popular on a Prelude, there wasn't a plug and play conversion harness for the Prelude. So I went with the Hybrid Racing conversion harness. I noticed I've been ordering a lot of parts from Hybrid Racing, but I mean, they make some really good quality parts and they specialize in K-swaps. Hybrid Racing conversion harness cost me $160. Next big question is motor mounts. Now, if you have a chassis that already has K-swap motor mounts for your car, good on you, man. Because the Prelude, oh man. I have the 5th gen Prelude, and as of now, there's no K-swap kits for the 5th gen Prelude, but there is a kit for the 4th gen Prelude. So what others have done is they took the 4th gen K-swap mounts and put it in the 5th gen, which required some modification. So I went with the Hasport motor mounts for a 4th gen Prelude, and it cost me $637.55. Axles. This was a very intimidating part of the swap as well because I didn't know what a half shaft was at the time. I didn't know how to tell what axle would fit in a K-series. From my research, there's about 5 different chassis that have the same spline count where the axle will be able to fit in the engine and transmission. Pretty much I'll post a table right here showing the different lengths of the axles. Pretty much there are 2 half shafts you could use. You could use either the K20 half shaft, which is from RSX or 8th gen Civic, or you could use a K24 half shaft, which is from the TSX. The K24 half shaft is a lot longer than the K20 half shaft. So just, you gotta play around with the measurements, man. What worked on my Prelude is pretty much the entire K24 setup. So I got the TSX driver side axle, the TSX half shaft, and the TSX passenger axle. And everything fits perfectly. Now, you gotta make sure that it's from a manual, okay? Because the automatic half shafts are a little bit taller and they're not gonna fit. I had an automatic TSX half shaft and it just would not fit because the motor I got was from automatic and I didn't know that the half shafts had different heights. So I sourced the Acura TSX manual half shaft. I think I paid like 80 bucks for the half shaft. It was used, but hey man, it worked. How much did I spend on those axles? Left and right axle, I got it from Rock Auto, and you know, really good prices. For both left and right axles, I spent a total of $85. And lastly, the headers. There's a bunch of K-swap headers out there. You just gotta keep in mind that there's the 4 tubes that are either side by side, or you have 2 stacked on 2. So just depending on your subframe, you'll probably most likely want the 4 tubes that go side by side, like I did. I went with the Skunk 2 K-Swap Alpha header. And how much did that cost me? I also got that on Black Friday. And so I spent $392.02. So that's pretty much the basic must-haves for K-Swap. Now everything else is optional. You don't have to do all this stuff, or the price will vary just depending on how you go about doing this, all right? So pretty much I'm talking about like all the custom work. So the fuel system, cooling system, power steering if you want to keep that, and I guess a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff. Okay, so for the fuel system, Jack Spanier has a full kit and it only cost me $175. Typically the fuel system will be the fuel rail, fuel pressure regulator, fuel lines, which is the PTFE hoses and fittings, and the fuel gauge, I guess. What's cool is that you could pretty much source each one of these parts yourself and you know, just upgrade it to your needs. But just to get your K-Swap running, I recommend just getting the Jack Spanier K-Swap kit. And then later on down the road, you could upgrade it if you'd like. Power steering system, this is completely optional. I decided to convert to an electric power steering system. So I got the Volvo S40 pump. I got it myself at the junkyard, only $100, okay? If you get on eBay or something, it's gonna cost about $200 or $250. I had to buy various fittings and PTFE hose, which was probably another 60 bucks, let's say. Oh, clutch lines, that's the other thing I forgot. You could convert your clutch lines to PTFE, or you could do like what I did. I just used custom brake lines and fittings to make my own clutch line. A brake line kit is only like 30 bucks on Amazon. I did have to buy a K-Series slave cylinder, which is bolted onto the transmission. I went with OEM Honda. I got it from Hybrid Racing and it cost me $70. Cooling system, this is where it could get pretty tricky because the RSX radiator is different than the Civic radiator. They got the, you know, the positioning of the outlets weird, right? So you could get an RSX or Civic radiator and make that work. I went with a aftermarket CSF K-Swap radiator and it was pretty expensive, but it's really nice, all right? So I spent $625 on the radiator itself, but it also included a spall fan, which is pretty expensive as well. I got K-Swap radiator hoses from Hybrid Racing, which was $70. I got a swivel thermostat housing because with K-Swaps, like I said, the positioning of the inlets and outlets could be anywhere. So I wanted the swivel neck so I could just move it around. The Jack Spanier thermostat housing cost me $90. While I was in there, I went ahead and replaced the water pump. I got an OEM TSX water pump and that cost me $88. Sensors, remember, we're K-swapping an RSX engine, right? Which originally comes with the K20. So when you use the K24 instead, there's a few sensors that you have to retain from the K20. So pretty much you need the K20 knock sensor, the crank position sensor, and the O2 sensor. There's 3 other sensors that you need to get the K-Swap running, and they're all on the throttle body or in the area. On the throttle body, you'll need the map sensor, throttle position sensor, and idle air temperature sensor. So the K24 is already gonna have the map sensor, but since the throttle body is electric and not cable driven, I had to find a cable throttle body. So I went with the 72 millimeter Jack Spanier throttle body, and that cost me $70. Throttle cable, I got it from Hybrid Racing. It's for a 96 to 2000 Honda Civic EK, and that cost me only $38. I swapped out the K24 intake manifold with the Skunk 2 Ultra Street manifold. I got it used on Facebook Market and spent $400 on that. Clutch kit, I'm assuming you need to get the clutch kit for the transmission, okay? So I have a K24 motor but my transmission is from a K20. My clutch kit of choice is the ZE Stage 1, and it cost me $320, which is actually cheaper on rockauto.com versus ordering it directly from ZE. Pretty weird. A ZE Flywheel, which only cost me $63.79. Keep the flywheel the same as the transmission. K20 transmission, K20 flywheel, K20 clutch kit, okay? You could probably change it up, but that's just the way mine is set up, and it works. Here's a really important note. If your engine is from an automatic, you have to get manual flywheel bolts, okay? The flywheel bolts on an automatic are too short. So when you try to install the flywheel, you're gonna find out it's not really gonna thread. If it does, it's probably gonna come off. So be sure to get manual flywheel bolts. I got 8 for $43.92. Now the ZE clutch kit does come with a throwout bearing, but from my research, aftermarket throwout bearings are hit or miss. So it's safe to just go with the OEM throwout bearing. I spent $49 on a Honda throwout bearing. Okay, and lastly, engine mods. For a K-swap, technically you could just take the motor and just swap it in there and it'll be fine. But I mean, you're putting in all this work to do the K-swap, why not refresh it, you know? Get a new timing chain, tensioners, just go and replace all that, because you don't want to do that with the engine in the car. I found a timing chain kit which uses all OEM parts, and the best price was from HPT Auto. I paid $409.99. And while I was there, I ordered ACL bearings. It comes with the main and rod bearings, and that cost me $104. I got the VTC Gear for $162 shipped, straight from Japan, brand new OEM. And I did the Type S oil pump. If I could do the swap over again, I would skip on the Type S oil pump. When you do your research, a lot of people's gonna recommend doing the Type S oil pump. Pretty much, the K24 oil pump has balance shafts, whereas the Type S doesn't have balance shafts. And so the Type S is gonna allow you to rev higher safely, but it does cause a lot of vibrations. If you're planning to daily your car and enjoy driving it, skip out on the Type S oil pump, man. Like, you might think you'll be okay with it, but when you're just sitting in traffic or just chilling in the car and you just hear this constant vibrating noise, bruh, it just, I don't know. Me, I would like to undo that mod. But anyways, the Type S oil pump, I got the kit from iRunOEM.com, and it cost me $319.95. And I would say that's pretty much it for all the K-swap parts. There's a lot of other miscellaneous things that I didn't mention because it's very specific to my swap, and your swap might be different. So when you do your swap, you'll figure out if you need this part or not. For example, the Skunk 2 intake manifold. The Skunk 2 intake manifold is missing a water port right next to it. So I had to buy this adapter and pretty much just reroute the coolant lines. Oh yeah, I forgot. I got the K-tuned water housing on the side, and I paired it with the DC5 Creations heater valve kit so I could run AN lines for my cooling system. It's just a big mess, man. Like, it's all optional at that point, pretty much. You know, those are things that you don't need to do. But besides all the K-swap parts, there's gonna be a bunch of other miscellaneous things you'll need. Like, for example, I had to buy a welding machine, and then I had to buy a welding helmet, welding jacket, gloves. If you don't already have one, you need an engine hoist, an engine stand. You might want a weighted 19mm socket to break loose the crank pulley, because that thing is stuck on there. And if you use a weighted socket with the impact, it's gonna rip it off easily. Don't forget, you'll need a fan switch to kick on the fans on your radiator, a temperature sensor so you can send the temperature straight to your gauge. Oh, and I don't think you can use an automatic starter. You'll need a manual starter. I guess that's pretty much it, man. That was a lot of parts to go through. I know it's kind of all over the place,